Hi, I'm Kai Bannister and I'm doing my project on skateboarding, well, more specifically, Ollies. I chose skateboarding and Ollies as my topic for our math project because I have had a passion for skateboarding until a few years ago because I had injured myself while skateboarding, so I decided to stop. But I could not do a trick to save my life. The only thing I can do on skateboarding was go back and forth and ultimately fall and injure myself. So I have taken the opportunity to do a math problem for one of the most famous skateboarders, Tony Hawk, to show how he can perform an ollie and how he can execute that perfectly. So let's get into it. I'm just going to give some basic background of an ollie. They also have three forces acting upon the skater, which is initial vertical force, that's from pushing off the ground, gravity, which is pulls the skateboard back down, and then horizontal motion is if the skateboarder is moving forward, the velocity remains constant during the jump. Now, just some quick little facts about Tony Hawk. He is the most well-known skater. He performs an ollie at a height of 0.3 to 0.5 meters, and he was the first person to land a 900 degrees spin. So the first thing that we're going to solve for is initial velocity for Tony Hawk. To do that, we use the kinematic equation, which is the equation of motion under a constant acceleration. This is the equation for that, where Vy is 0 meters per second because that's velocity at maximum height. G is 9.8 meters per second, which is acceleration due to gravity. H is maximum height in meters, and V subscript 0y is initial vertical velocity. The next thing we do is we rearrange our equation to solve for initial velocity. The first thing we're going to do is we got to set V squared y to 0 because that's peak velocity. Next, we solve for initial velocity by adding 2gh to both sides. We take the square root of both sides to solve for initial velocity. Now we can solve for initial velocity. Now the question is, if Tony Hawk reaches a maximum height of 0.4 meters, what is his initial vertical velocity? Now let's solve. First, we're going to show our equation we're solving for. Next, we will input the values for g and h, our variables. For g, it's 9.8, and for h, it's 0.4. Next, we do the math for that by multiplying those two together. We get 7.84. Now we take the square root of 7.84, which is 2.8 meters per second. So now Tony Hawk's initial velocity is 2.8 meters per second. Solving for initial velocity was something that we needed to figure out prior to solving this question. That question is, if Tony Hawk performs an ollie with an initial vertical velocity of 2.8 meters per second and moves forward at a speed of 7 meters per second, we gotta solve for A, what is the maximum height he reaches during the ollie? B, how much time does it take for him to reach the maximum height? And C, how far does he travel horizontally during the ollie? To solve for A, we use the kinetic equation for vertical motion. This is the equation here, where V is the final velocity, which is 0 at peak height, V subscript 0 is initial velocity, and A is acceleration due to gravity, and it's negative because the skater is being pulled back down, and S is height reached, which is what we are solving for. The first thing we need to do is obviously rearrange. To do that, we have to subtract V subscript 0 squared to both sides, and then divide both sides by 2A. Now we can solve. The first thing we do is show the equation we're solving for. Next, we input our values. We have the value of v, which is 0, and the value of v subscript 0, which is 2.8, which is our initial velocity. And we input a, which is negative 9.8. Now we solve. We get negative 7.84 on top and negative 19.6 on bottom. We divide that out and we get 0.4 meters as our final answer. So Tony Hawk reaches a maximum height of 0.4 meters. For solving how long it takes him to reach maximum height, we use the kinematic equation for time in uniformly accelerated motion. This is the equation here, where t is equal to time in seconds, v is equal to final velocity, which is 0 at peak height, v subscript 0 is initial velocity, which we already have, and a is obviously acceleration due to gravity, which is negative 9.8. Now we rearrange. To do that, we have to subtract v subscript 0 from both sides, and then divide both sides by a. Now let's solve. First, we show our equation, input our values. We get a fraction of negative 2.8 on top and negative 9.8 on bottom. We get our final answer of 0.29 seconds. So it takes Tony Hawk 0.29 seconds to reach the maximum height before coming back down. And since time going up is the same as the time going down, we can find the total air time by using this equation. The equation is t equals 2t. We enter 0.29 for our t, and then we get a grand total of 0.58 seconds. So total air time is 0.58 seconds. Now we solve for how far he travels horizontally. To do that, we use the definition of average velocity equation, which is also known as speed. The equation for that is v equals d over t, where v is velocity or speed, d is distance in meters, and t is total air time. First, we gotta rearrange our equation. We do that by multiplying both sides by t and then rewriting it into d equals v times t. Next, we solve. First, we gotta input our values for v and t. So v is equal to 7 meters per second and t is equal to 0.58 seconds, which gives us a grand total of 4.06 meters. So Tony Hawk travels a horizontal distance of 4.06 meters. These are the websites I use for my project. So there you have it. That's how you can solve the equations for an ollie and how Tony Hawk can perform them.